Happy Hanukkah to everybody. I want to first dedicate today's class to the memory of Manya Rivka Bas Chaim Marsha Goldenfeld. Her yahrzeit is next week on the 9th of Tevis, and her family is sponsoring today's class in her memory. I also want to wish a mazel tov to my daughter and my son-in-law. They had a baby boy a few hours ago, a nice Hanukkah gift, a Hanukkah baby. He should bring much light into the world because the world sure can use more light. We should all celebrate many, many simchas. Everyone should have simchas and celebrations in their family. Hanukkah is just a wonderful holiday in what it represents, aside for the fact that it's joyous and aside for the fact that there's gifts and Hanukkah gelt and those little chocolate coins, which are great, and that we love playing dreidel. But the theme of Hanukkah is so powerful. It's a theme of light over darkness. It's a theme of religious freedom. It's a theme of standing up for what's right. It has so many elements to this particular holiday that literally everyone in the world can find some way to connect with the holiday of Hanukkah. And over the last few decades, we've seen this phenomenon that has taken over the world in public Hanukkah celebrations, in lighting menorahs out there in the public. That's a modern day phenomenon of putting up big menorahs in shopping centers and government centers in front of the White House, and making the statement of religious freedom through the lighting of the Hanukkah menorah. Just on Sunday evening, the first night of Hanukkah, one of the most emotional Hanukkah festivals that one can possibly experience. We got to see it on social media, we got to see it over the internet. At the Brandenburg Gate, in the exact spot where Hitler Yamach Shemai stood in 1940 and declared that the world would be Yidden reign, that the world would be free of all Jews, that he would wipe Jewish people off the face of the map. Literally at that particular gate, tens of thousands of Jews gathered this year, first night of Hanukkah, together with the leaders, political leaders of Germany, to light one of the largest menorahs in that country's history. And literally you see the two pictures side by side. You see the picture of 1940 with all the swastikas around and everyone declaring the end of the Jewish people. And you see the picture of this huge menorah being lit in that very same spot. It makes you feel that literally we have changed the world. The world has become a brighter world with the freedom that the Jewish people have fought for thousands of years. Wherever we've gone, we fought for that right for freedom. There would be no religion in the world if it were not for Hanukkah. Understand that the religious freedom that we fought for Hanukkah, yes, it was Judaism, but if it wasn't for the victory of Hanukkah, there would never have been Christianity, there never would have been Islam, there would not have been the freedom of any religion. So Hanukkah really represents the freedom of faith of all people. We are studying the Shema at this particular class on Wednesday afternoons, and we've been talking about three words, b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol me'odecha, that you serve God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, and with all of your possessions. If you think about these three themes, you also have the theme, there are three themes when it comes to the 613 mitzvot. We have the theme of Edut, Chukim, and Mishpatim, and I'll translate for you and explain. The 613 commandments of the Torah can be divided into three categories. One category is called Edut. Edut is testimonial laws. Testimonial laws means it's something that's built into our faith, built into our religion, because it's to remind us of something. You light the menorah. Why? Because you want candles in your house? Maybe. You like the colorful candles? Maybe. But it reminds you of something. It reminds you of the original miracle of Hanukkah. You have Shabbat. Why? Because it reminds you of the original week of the world where God created on 6 days and rested on the seventh. You have the commandment of Passover. Why? Because it reminds you of the Exodus. That's what I mean by testimonial laws. That doing the act reminds you of something. You put on tefillin to remind you of something. You put up a mezuzah to remind you of something. It's a trigger. It triggers a thought. That's edut, testimonial laws. That is connected to the words b'chol levavcha, with all of your heart, because what it does is it's a feeling. The testimonial laws create the feeling. It creates an emotion. You feel the particular emotion by these holidays. And therefore, the testimonial laws are connected to the words of B'chol Levavcha. We then have the statutes, the chukim. Chukim are the laws with no reason. That's connected to B'chol Nafshecha, with all of your soul. The idea of self-sacrifice. You give yourself completely over to God beyond rational. There are laws in the Torah that the Torah does not give you a reason for, and yet we have sacrificed ourselves for it. I'll give you an example. The most famous of all laws of the Torah that has no reason is the laws of kosher. Now, although people think it's connected to health laws, dietary laws, kosher has no reason mentioned in the Torah. You can come up with any reason you want, but the Torah does not say a reason. It says this is what God asks of the Jewish people. That's difficult. It's very difficult for you to take on a commandment, and when someone asks you why, you say, I don't know, because God asked it of me. So when it comes to Passover, you can explain Passover. When it comes to Shabbat, you can explain Shabbat. When it comes to the Hanukkah menorah, you can explain Hanukkah menorah. Why do you spin the Grager when you read the story of Purim? You can explain that. Why do you keep kosher? Because my parents did. Because my grandparents did. Their parents did. Going all the way back to Sinai. Why? Because God asked them to. That's b'chom nafshecha. That's serving God with all of your soul. It's even beyond the intellect. There is others, the mitzvah of shatnez, not mixing wool and linen together. There are various other laws in the Torah that have no reason. I remember hearing this story about this. And the story itself may bring about a chuckle, but I think we can all relate to it. There was this woman that started going to Torah classes, started taking some courses. She lived in Manhattan, a successful businesswoman, but she realized that there was something missing in her life. She wanted some depth, some spirituality. So she started, and with the process along, she started giving some thought to the idea of kosher. Now, at first it was foreign to her to change my home menu, my diet, to change the restaurants that I dine in. But with time, over years, it became more and more of a challenge that she wanted to take on. And finally, she did it. She called the rabbi of the adult education institute that she was going to in Manhattan. She says, I've decided I'd like to do it. But first I need an education of what it's going to mean. So can you come over to my house, my apartment, go over the kitchen with me, talk to me, tell me exactly what's going to take place here. What dishes can I keep? What do I have to get rid of? What pots? What happens with the oven, with the microwave, with the dishwasher? There's a lot of questions when you go kosher. And they make an appointment, and he comes over, and he begins the class, the workshop. And we do that here too. If anyone's interested, you'll call Rabbi Levine. He'll spend some time with you in your kitchen and tell you what it's going to take. As he's going through all of it, this we have to blowtorch, this we can kosher. By boiling, this we can't kosher. He sees a pack of Chiclets gum on the counter. And he simply comments, and by the way, that's going to have to go as well. Because it wasn't kosher. And the woman responds with, I can't eat Chiclets gum? Are you telling me if I go kosher, I can't have that gum anymore? Now understand, he's already spent hours talking about blowtorching an oven, getting rid of half of her pots and pans and dishes. I mean, the sacrifice was great. The restaurants that she cannot go to, all of the OU and OK that she's going to need to bring in. And she stops short and she says, you mean I can't have that gum? Deal's off. Not going ahead with it. Now, again, over time, she calmed down with the Chiclets gum when the rabbi brought like 17 different types of kosher gums that are out there for her to try, to find one that she liked, because there's replacements for Chiclets gum. There's replacements now for just about everything. The kosher world has become so great in coming up with any type of fine food with the kosher supervision on it. There's literally nothing you can't find in the world of kosher that can't compete with non-kosher. Especially kosher wine today wins every single award out there in wines with the remarkable company of Herzog Wines, whose headquarters is right here in Oxnard. But I don't tell that story often to mock the woman, because we all have that. We all have that Chiclets gum. In different areas of our lives, we have what others would look at and say, come on, if you could do this, you can do this. Why can't you do that? No, because we're each different. And for her, chiclets gum was the biggest hurdle. She can give up that restaurant and go to a kosher restaurant, but gum was something very important to her until she was able to overcome it. But kosher can be difficult because it doesn't have the reason. It's not, doctor says you're going to have to go on a healthy diet, otherwise it's going to cause disease to your heart. Okay, you have a driving force. Here the Torah doesn't give you that reason. That's b'chol nafshecha. That's when you're serving God with all of your soul. And then we have the third category of mitzvot, and those are called Mishpatim. Mishpatim are civil laws. The Torah is one of the first books of a legal code that defines how we conduct business with one another, how we conduct business neighbor to neighbor, customer to store owner. The business relationships that we have, the social relationships, are governed by a whole set of laws called Mishpatim, which, by the way, sets the foundation for a good percentage of the entire Talmud. Where the Talmud will get into such detail, the very first really written out legal code that there is. So much of American law is derived from the civil code found in the portion of Mishpatim and defined in the Talmud. A lot of it is financial matters, and that's what the words b'chol me'odecha means. That you serve God with everything. That means even when it comes to the world of financing, there's a way of doing it while serving God, doing it the right way. Then the Shema gets on to the theme, and these words which I command you today shall be on your heart. What does that mean, it should be on your heart? What does it mean to have words on your heart? It means that the Torah should not be a subject to you. You go to school, whether it's elementary school, high school, college, you go on to become a professor. There's a lot of subjects that they make you take that's not really connected to your career. And so you're going to have to take certain credits in math, you're going to have to take certain credits in science, you're going to have to take philosophy and history, all different subjects. And you go to these subjects and you find it, some of them interesting, some of them boring, but you got to pass the exam, so you study. So if you have no interest in becoming a scientist, and your career has nothing to do with science, but you're taking the subject of science in school, you're studying it primarily because you want to pass the test and you want to get a good grade. You're studying algebra, geometry, trigonometry. We always ask the question, am I going to need this in life, right? Am I going to ever need this? Will I ever sit and need to come up with So some careers, yes. But if you were driven in school to get good grades, or if it was important to your parents that you got good grades, you did your homework and you crammed before a test. Anyone here from New York State? Anyone out there from New York State? We had something called the Regents. Remember the Regents? Regents were these end-of-year exams given by the state of New York, and you really worked hard and prepared for those Regents. They were hard tests. They weren't easy, at least back then. They were hard tests. And you studied for weeks and weeks and weeks to pass the Regents. I doubt there was anything on those tests that I really ever needed in life. But I was driven, I wanted good grades. That's a subject that we take. That's not what Torah should be. Torah shouldn't be a subject. It should be on your heart. It should be part of your life, part of your essence. There's a big difference between history and memory. We use the terms both, but they're very different. History is something that happened in the world, but it has no bearing on me. It's just history. There was a war between these two countries. Good to know. History. You go to museums, you learn about history. You're fascinated by museums. You're fascinated by historical museums. You ever go to a Jewish museum? It feels very different to you. You ever go to a Holocaust museum? It feels very different to you. Because it's not about a part of history of the world, it's about you. You get tears in your eyes when you see those exhibits because it's your parents, it's your grandparents, it's your uncles, it's your aunts, it's you. It's an essence of who you are. It's different. History is cold. It's outside. It's external. Memory means it's me. It's my memory. It's my life. It's my essence. It's who I am. Says the Shema, these words need to be on your heart. They need to be part of you. And it has that word in there, hayom. That word hayom is found throughout the Torah. What does hayom mean? Today. The Shema is telling you, treat the Torah as if God gave it to you today. Torah is not a museum book. Torah is today. It's not a once upon a time there used to be an ancient people. Kids, the youth today, and especially the teens, are not interested in living in someone else's ancient world. They're not. It may have worked for us when we were growing up that this was important to Bubby and Zaidi. Go to shul because Bubby and Zaidi want you to go to shul. It may have worked in the shtetl life. Trust me, it doesn't work in the American youth life. The fact that they had a great Bubby and great Zaidi that used to go to shul doesn't mean anything to them. That's not what's going to get them to go to shul with you. Bubby and Zaidi in the old shtetl used to use an outhouse as well. They're not about to use an outhouse because they did back in Poland. It's a modern world. Hayom means you need to make Judaism relevant today. That it means something to them today. In a modern day world, for a modern kid, why is Judaism important? Don't go back and say, because 100 years ago, because 500 years ago, because 1,000 years ago. Yes, you can say that God gave it to us at Sinai, but he gave it to you so that it could have an impact in your life today, for today. I remember early in my career out here, I'm here now this last week, 38 years, my 38th anniversary of being out in the Conejo Valley was last week. I came out the Erev Thanksgiving. And I remember in the early times, I was asked by a dear friend of mine who was the rabbi of the temple in Thousand Oaks, Temple Adat Elokim, Rabbi Alan Greenbaum. We came out about the same period of time. And we became very good friends. And he asked me if I would speak to his Hebrew school, address his Hebrew school. And I went and I prepared this talk for this Hebrew school there. And Alan introduced me to all of the students of Adat Elokim. And in his introduction, in what he thought was respectful, he meant no harm by it, he said, "Do you remember we studied that the ancient Hebrews used to put on black boxes on their hands and on their head? He still does that." That was the introduction to me. So do you remember the ancient Hebrews used to do that? This guy, he's part of the museum. We found a relic, and he's going to speak to you today. Now the kids are fascinated, right? They're expecting to see the horns come out of my head. And I corrected him right away, and I said, it wasn't the ancient Hebrews that put on tefillin. It's the Hebrews today. It's each of you. We all still do it. Some do it more, some do it less, but the commandment is just as important to us today as it was thousands of years ago. You may have heard me tell this story before, so forgive me, but it's okay. It's a good story, so you can hear it again and tell it to someone else today. Back in the old country, there was a poor Jew, and we'll call him Moishela, because Moishela is a good name. And Moishela would have to go every month to visit the local poritz. The poritz was the land baron, to pay his rent. And during one such visit to the poritz's home, he noticed that this duke, this land baron, had a plate in front of him upon which there was sitting the most exquisite-looking mushroom omelet. It looked so good, and the poritz is eating it. It smelled so good, it looked good. And poor Moishela is just sitting there and he's putting his pennies on the table to pay his rent. But all he can think about was, look how lucky this man is. Look at what he has for lunch. I'll never have an omelet that looks like that. And his whole way home, all he can think about was how unfair life is. That this Poritz gets a mushroom omelet for lunch, and I don't. That's all he can think about. He comes home. He has a very sweet wife. We'll call her Yentl. And he says, Yentl, I've been thinking. You know, I may not own land out there. And I may not be a Poritz. I may not be a land baron. I may not be a duke. But in this house, I'm the Poritz. And in this house, I insist on having a mushroom omelet. If the Poritz can have a mushroom omelet, why can't Moshe? Yentl is a very sweet woman. And Yentl says, my dear husband Moshe, nothing would give me greater joy than making you a mushroom omelet for lunch. There's one problem. We have no mushrooms, nor is there any money around for me to go to the market and buy mushrooms. So Moshe thinks to himself and says, Yentl, you're a good cook. You figure it out. Substitute. Find something to substitute for the mushrooms. But I'm the Poritz in this house and I want a mushroom omelet. Okay, Moshe, I'll find something to substitute for the mushrooms. We have another problem. We have no eggs. And we have no money to buy eggs. Substitute. Find something to replace the eggs. Okay, Moshe. But we have no flour. We have no salt. We have no black pepper. Every ingredient this poor Yentl could want to make her husband, the Poritz of the house, Moshe, a mushroom omelet. Find something substitute. No margarine, no butter, nothing. I want a mushroom omelet. So poor Yentl goes into the kitchen and she puts on her apron and she opens the pantries and she puts together whatever she can and she mixes it up and she puts it into a pan and she cooks it up and she puts it on the nicest broken plate they own. And she tells her husband, sit by the table, put the napkin by your neck just like the Poritz sits. And she serves him the substitute mushroom omelet. Moshe is all excited. And he takes his broken fork and he digs into it and he puts it into his mouth. He tastes it and he spits it out. And he says, I don't even know why the Poritz likes mushroom omelets. So why do I tell you the story about Moshe and Yentl and the mushroom omelets? Because we did the same exact thing. Our grandparents had beautiful mushroom omelets. They had tradition. They had Yiddishkeit. They had Judaism. They had Torah. They had mitzvot. And we came to America and we made a decision that it's probably going to be too difficult here in America. So you know what we're going to do? We're going to substitute. And we started picking and choosing which ingredients of the Torah to take out and what we're going to substitute it with. And we continued to do that one decade and another decade and another decade. And then we tell our little tatala teenager, or we tell our little child, we want you to love Judaism. We want you to be a proud Jew. So they want to taste it. And we give them a substitute mushroom omelet that doesn't have the eggs, and doesn't have the mushrooms, and doesn't have Shabbos, and doesn't have Pesach, and doesn't have all of the traditions. And what happens? The kids taste it, and they say, "Feh, I don't love it. It's a political group. You guys have one view, I have another view. It's a social club." We have substituted the richness of Judaism and created a mushroom omelet that doesn't taste good. And they spit it out. And what is it they say when they spit it out? Why is it that Bubby and Zaidi gave their lives for Judaism? I don't understand. When it comes to presenting Judaism to young people, even if you're not observant yourself, teach it to them in the real way. Let them know what the real traditions are. Let them know what the laws are. Even if it means saying, we are not observant. We're not religious, not yet. But I want my children to know what it really was all about. Let them taste it. Maybe they'll like it. Maybe they'll enjoy it. Maybe they'll want the real mushroom omelet. And if they do, be proud of them. Don't be threatened that they're more religious than you. It's okay. I want all my children to be far more religious than me. We all should want them to. We want them to be wealthier than us. We want them to be more successful than us. We want them to be better looking than us. We want them to have more. So why not more religious than us? Don't feel threatened by it. We see this phenomena today taking place on college campuses all throughout the United States of America. It's been written about now in the Wall Street Journal, and all the big publications have written the revolution that is taking place on now 324 college campuses in the United States of America. Chabad houses are packed. They're packed with non-religious college students who are thirsting for something real while they're away at university. And they're mobbed. They're packed for Shabbat, they're packed for holidays, they're packed for classes. Why? Because people want authenticity. They want something real. How they'll choose to observe, leave them to make that choice. But Judaism needs to be on your heart. It needs to be real. It needs to be authentic. The greatest tragedy is how many Jews have left Judaism and abandoned Judaism without even knowing what Judaism is. The person that knows and studied and makes a decision with their own free choice to leave it, okay. But the person that never knew Judaism and assimilates out of Judaism and intermarries out of Judaism never had a chance. There was once this rabbi, he had a large family. He still has a large family. He lived in New York. Now, you're familiar with the Jewish holidays. There's the holiday of Sukkot, the holiday of Passover. Those two holidays have something in common. They have 2 days at the front end of the holiday. They have days in the middle called Chal HaMoed, which are weekdays but still connected to the holiday. And then there's the 2 post days of the holiday. So Passover has 2 first days where we have the Seder nights. It has 4 days that we call Chal HaMoed. They're we still eat matzah, but it's not exactly like a Sabbath day. It's a weekday. And then we have 2 end days of Passover. Now, during those intermediate days of Chal HaMoed, there's no school in the Jewish schools. Okay, we're off from school. The kids are off from school. So we spend, I would say, about 2 months before the holiday planning and plotting what we're doing with those 4 days off from school. Okay? So I grew up in New York, and for those of you that grew up in New York, remember Coney Island, right? Coney Island Amusement Park. Okay, before there was anything else, that's all we had. We would dream we're going to go one day to Coney Island. Then they opened Great Adventures in New Jersey. It's only an hour and a half away from New York. We're going to Great Adventures this Chal HaMoed. Sometimes the way the calendar worked out, baseball's opening game was on Chal HaMoed. I'm going to a Yankee game on Chal HaMoed. But this was big for us, is planning what we're doing. Coney Island used to also have the aquarium, so we would go to the aquarium. So this fellow that I'm telling the story about had 11 children. 2 of them happened to be in Israel for Passover. They were away in yeshiva, and they didn't come home for Passover, which left him 9. Now, to take 9 kids to an amusement park, you know what the prices are these days. These days, to go to Disneyland, it's about $1,700 a person, right? Well, to take 9 kids away is costly. To do it for 4 days costs money. So he's trying to come up with inexpensive ways to keep his kids busy during these intermediate days. There's only so many times you can go to the Prospect Park Zoo or the Bronx Zoo. That's low budget, you know. Well, my father said we're going to the Prospect Park Zoo. It was a letdown, big letdown. Coney Island, yay. Prospect Park, yeah. But anyway, so he comes up with an idea. He tells his kids it's a surprise. Where you're going is a surprise. But everyone in the van I'm not telling you where I'm taking you, but it's a surprise. Now, the kids are all excited about this surprise. 9 kids pile into the van, and he starts taking them, gets onto the highway, gets onto the Belt Parkway, sign Kennedy Airport. Wow, where's that taking us? The signs say the airport. Are we getting on a plane? Is that taking us on a plane today? Are we going to Florida? Are we going to Miami Beach? Are we going to Disney World? Their fascination is going everywhere. And he says, no. We're not getting on a plane. But he does get off at the exit that said JFK Airport. So where we're going? You'll see. You'll see. They go to the parking lot of JFK Airport. And they get on the air train. Anyone been to JFK Airport? There's something called the air train. It goes through all the terminals. It takes you to the rent-a-car place. And they're getting on the train to take them to the terminals. And that's when the father says the excitement of the surprise. Today, we're going on the air train. That's the surprise. We're going on the train that goes around and around the airport. But there's a competition. He gives each of his kids a piece of paper and a pen. And he says, each time that we go around the airport, there's going to be a contest. The first contest is, how many planes do you see that has the name of a country on it? Like American Airlines or Swiss Air, that there's a name of a country on the plane, and you got to write it down. And whoever gets the most, as we make the complete revolution around the airport, wins round 1. Then goes round 2. Round 2, how many airplanes have a flag on it? And he comes up with all different creative competitions. And the kids actually get excited about this. This is fun. It's unique. It's different. It's a great brainstorm that Dad came up with. So he's got 9 kids sitting there with their paper and pen, and each time they're screaming, they see a plane, they see a this, they see a that. On one of the stops of the airplane, this pilot gets on board. And at that particular time, the train was full. There were no seats. The father immediately motions to his kids, respect, get up, give the pilot the seat. And as kids right away stand up, they tell the pilot to sit down. The pilot says, oh, no. I have been sitting for 16 hours. You guys sit, I'm going to stand. And he says to the dad, he says, so school trip? He says, no, it's not exactly a school trip. So what is it? It's a family trip. He says, what do you mean, they're all yours? Yeah. He says, there's 9 of them. He says, yeah, 2 are in Israel. There's really 11. So where are you flying off to today? Well, we're not exactly flying anywhere. So what are you doing on the air train? Well, there's this holiday. It's called Passover. Passover commemorates the Exodus from Egypt. And the holiday, if you look in the Bible, it says that there's 2 first days, there's 2 last days, but the intermediate days, it's called Chal HaMoed. The kids are off from school, so I got to come up with something creative, and therefore I came up with this competition. And he explains, and all the kids are looking, showing the pilot, the papers, the flags, the this. And he says, if you don't mind me asking, why are the boys wearing that thing on their head, the kippah? And he explains, the kippah represents to think about God above you. Whatever we do, we remember God. And what's the side curls all about? And what are those strings that the boys are wearing? He starts asking all of these questions. And the father's answering, sometimes the kids are answering. And at some point the pilot says, I need to share something with you. I've been a pilot now for close to 3 decades. It's a hard job, not because the job itself is hard, but because for 3 out of 4 weeks, you're just not home. You fly to this part of the world, to that part of the world, to that part of the world. I work for 3 weeks, and the 4th week I'm off. But even the week I'm off, what does it really mean? The 3 weeks end, I could be in Australia somewhere. Till I get home, it's already 3 days of that week off that I have. It's not a real life. It's not an easy family life. And in fact, my marriage ended in divorce because my wife just couldn't keep up with the schedule. So I want you to think, he says, when I walk into a cockpit, we have these computers there that are so advanced. I can put in any destination in the world. And this computer will be able to tell the plane exactly to the inch how to get from this airport to that airport. It's so sophisticated. So, I as a pilot, I can go anywhere in the world. And yet the reality is, I'm going nowhere. I'm just flying an airplane. But I have no home to come home to. I have no family to come home to. So I can fly tens of thousands of miles, but I'm going nowhere. Look at you. You guys are going nowhere. You've gone around and around and around some 10 times today. You're going in circles. You're going nowhere. But you're going everywhere. Because you have each other. You have your faith. You have your traditions. I may be going everywhere, but I'm going nowhere. You're going nowhere, but you're going everywhere. That's the message we need to pass on. That's what the Shema is saying, that it has to be presented to the next generation, not as old ancient laws, but they're alive today and they mean something. They matter. It matters that the next generation embraces this. That's the education that we seek. I'll close with this story, and with this we'll close out our fall semester, and I'll send out an email when we're going to start up again for our winter semester. In New York and in other parts of the country, there is something called the release time. The release time is that the public school systems allow an hour of a week of school off. If someone of a particular religion requests it, that they would like to have religious training for that 1 hour. The courts have mandated this. The school will not provide the religious training, but has to allow for the kid to be off for that hour to be provided by an outside faith, whether it's the church or the synagogue, to be given religious training for 1 hour a week. So it's called the release time. In New York, it was the Wednesdays. The schools would give off Wednesday for 1 hour for religious training. And so the larger churches would take advantage of this. And in the Jewish world, Chabad took advantage of this. And Chabad arranged for there to be rabbinic students to visit public schools all over the city of New York for that particular 1 hour. Jewish kids whose parents signed up for this would be allowed out of the school. They would have literally a 1 hour session, a short prayer, a short Torah study, some refreshments, and back into class. 1 hour a week, the Wednesday hour. Now, in order to do this, you imagine how many schools you have in New York. It's one of the largest school districts in the world. So literally, they draft every rabbinic student they can. So there was one particular rabbinic student that signed up for this and was given a particular school. Now, the school that he was given was a 1 hour train ride away from Brooklyn, where he lived. So it takes 1 hour to get to the school, 1 hour to be with the kids, and 1 hour to get home. It takes 3 hours. This was a particular kid that excelled in Talmudic study. He loved the study of the Talmud. So after a few weeks of this, he wrote a letter to the Lubavitcher Rebbe that he later in life publicized. He let us know what he wrote to the Rebbe. He wrote to the Rebbe that I love studying the Talmud. And I'm not so good with kids in a teaching environment. I don't have the skill, the charisma perhaps. So when I go to the school and I try telling the kids a story, I don't think I'm connecting. And when I say the prayers with them, I'm not that exciting. I don't think that there's that much of a benefit. And I'm taking 3 hours off of study time. So I think it would be more beneficial, it would be more spiritual for me to stay in yeshiva rather than give up those 3 hours and learn during those 3 hours, and you'll find someone else to take my place. So I want to opt out. Makes sense? 3 hours of Torah study versus he doesn't feel he's connecting, find someone else. This is what the Rebbe answered him. The Rebbe said, I want you to know what is taking place in the heavenly worlds while you're at the school with those children. Those in heaven, the sages of the Talmud that you want to study, they themselves look down from their heavenly abode and they're jealous of you, that you have an opportunity to say one line of prayer with these sweet, precious children who have no Jewish education outside of this, who have been given this gift by the courts of 1 hour, and you have the merit to feed them the prayers during that 1 hour. The sages in heaven are saying, oh, I wish we had that opportunity when we were alive. To the point that Moses himself stops what he's doing in heaven and looks down and says, wow, I wish I could be that person that says the line, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, to these sweet, precious, innocent children. Still want to opt out? That's the way the Rebbe looked at the preciousness of the Jewish child in America. They're lost, and we have an opportunity to bring them home. It doesn't mean they're all going to become observant, but if we can say one line of Torah with them, if we can tell them one Jewish story, if we can tell them one thought of the Torah portion, perhaps it'll have an effect, so that when they get older, they'll want to learn more. So when they go off to college campus, they'll want to attend more. So that when they get married and have a family of their own, they'll want to bring more Jewish observance into their own lives and into this world. That's the message of the Shema for us. Make it relevant, Hayom. I want to wish all of you again a very, very happy Hanukkah, and I look forward to having you join me again for our winter semester. If you haven't as of yet contributed to our match campaign, and we're in the final hours of it, just go to the website chabadkeneo.com/match. We're almost finished. We're almost at our goal, just a little bit more, and I'm sure all of you out there will have either participated or will help us to reach our goal line. Have a wonderful Hanukkah, a great week, everybody.